The lab is quiet now. The lights are dim except for a faint glow from a desk across the room. Papers sit untouched. A chair remains slightly pulled back, as if someone just stood up moments ago. An African grey parrot waits. He tilts his head toward the empty doorway, then he speaks. Irene. No footsteps answer. The room stays still. He calls again, into the silence. And somewhere in that moment you feel something strangely familiar. Not hunger, not fear. Something else. Something that almost feels like missing someone. Because if you've ever sat in an empty room after someone important has left, you know that loneliness is more than being alone. But when an animal waits for someone who never comes back, what exactly are they feeling? Loneliness may be one of the most human experiences you know, or perhaps not. For a long time, people treated loneliness as a purely emotional state, something abstract, something uniquely human. But biology tells a different story. Loneliness is not simply sadness, it is a survival signal. Your ancestors survived because they stayed connected to others. A person separated from their group faced danger, hunger, and vulnerability. So evolution built an alarm system. When social bonds weaken, your brain notices. Deep inside the limbic system, the ancient emotional circuitry shared by many mammals, networks involved in attachment and stress begin to react. Chemicals shift, heart rates change, stress hormones rise. And another molecule enters the story, oxytocin. Sometimes called the bonding hormone, oxytocin helps strengthen social connections between parents and offspring, mates, and companions. It rewards closeness and makes relationships matter. But here's the fascinating part. Humans are not the only creatures with these systems. Many mammals possess similar limbic structures. Birds have neural circuits that perform remarkably similar functions. Across species, evolution appears to have built brains designed not merely to survive but to connect. Elephants live in family groups for decades. Dolphins call each other by signature whistles that function almost like names. Wolves mourn missing pack members. Again and again, nature seems to suggest the same thing. Social bonds are not an accident. Which leads to a difficult question. If the machinery of connection exists across species, could the pain of losing connection exist too? Or are you seeing your own emotions reflected back at you? At an animal sanctuary in Tennessee, an unusual friendship formed. An elephant named Tarra met a stray dog named Bella. They became inseparable. They walked together, rested together, waited for one another. Staff members noticed that if Bella disappeared, Tarra would search for her. Years passed like this. Then one day, Bella died. Reports from the sanctuary describe Tarra remaining near Bella's body and displaying behaviours often associated with grief. Some accounts say she carried Bella's body. Others describe prolonged mourning. No one can ask Tarra what she felt. You cannot step inside an elephant's mind, but when you watch an animal remain beside a companion who is gone, what exactly are you witnessing? Love, habit, grief, or something with no human word at all? Then there was Alex, an African grey parrot studied for decades by researcher Irene Pepperberg. Alex did far more than mimic sounds. He learned shapes, colours, numbers. He demonstrated forms of communication that challenged assumptions about animal intelligence. But intelligence alone is not what makes his story unforgettable. People who worked with Alex described signs of distress when he was isolated for long periods. Like many highly social parrots in the wild, separation appeared to matter deeply. Parrots do not naturally live alone. In nature, they spend much of their lives surrounded by flock members. A single bird separated from its group faces real danger. Perhaps that ancient wiring never disappeared. On the evening before Alex died unexpectedly, Irene prepared to leave the lab. As she had many times before, she told him good night. His response became famous. "You be good. I love you." Those were reportedly among the last words he ever spoke to her. Were they memorized sounds, a learned social ritual, or did those words carry something closer to what you would call affection? How much feeling must exist before it begins to resemble your own? The most surprising example may come from crows. You may think of them as clever scavengers, but crows are intensely social animals. They recognize individual faces, maintain long-term relationships, and even gather around dead members of their group in behaviors researchers sometimes call crow funerals. Studies have shown that social isolation can alter behavior in highly social birds. Deprived of interaction, some species display signs resembling stress and depression-like states. Crows live in complex social worlds. They remember allies, avoid enemies, teach information across generations. Their society may be far richer than it first appears. Imagine existing in a world full of relationships and then losing them. If connection shapes a crow's life, what happens when connection disappears? And if isolation changes behavior in ways that mirror your own, how different are those experiences really? Perhaps the hardest part of this question is that you may never get an answer. Animals cannot write poems about loneliness. They cannot describe the ache of absence. They cannot tell you whether they miss someone the way you do. But maybe language was never the point, because loneliness is not just a feeling. It is a function, a signal that says you were never meant to face the world alone. And if that signal appears again and again across the tree of life, in elephants, parrots, crows, and countless others, then perhaps the boundary between human and animal is not where you once imagined. Maybe the question isn't whether animals feel loneliness exactly like humans. Maybe no two humans experience loneliness exactly alike either. Perhaps what matters is simpler. A companion leaves, the world becomes quieter, something inside reaches outward and waits. You know that feeling, perhaps they do too, and somewhere in the quiet space between species, connection may be the oldest language life ever learned.